Imagine you've just been, handed the absolute most terrifying news of your entire life.
Right.
You need emergency open heart surgery,
Right.
like immediately. And your mind instantly goes straight to the operating room, right? The intense lights, the anesthesia going in, just the sheer physical danger of literally having your chest opened up.
Oh, absolutely. It's terrifying.
It really is. But then you go under, and an incredibly skilled surgeon, someone like Dr. Gregory Spowert, in this case we're looking at today, performs an absolute medical miracle. I mean, he repairs your heart. He literally saves your life.
Yeah, the apex of modern medicine right there.
Exactly. And then you open your eyes in the recovery room,
Yeah.
and the assumption you carry, the assumption I think we all carry in that exact moment,
Yeah.
is that waking up means you've won. Like, you survived the hardest part.
We completely view surgery as the definitive climax of a medical crisis. The narrative we are all taught says that the operating table is the absolute peak of your physical risk. And once you are wheeled into that recovery room, well, you are now on a safe downward slope toward just getting your normal life back.
But what if that narrative only really applies to people who actually have a normal life to return to?
Wow, yeah, that's the question.
Right. What if the true nightmare of major medical trauma doesn't happen on the operating table at all? What if the absolute most terrifying, dangerous part of the entire ordeal begins the exact moment you wake up?
And that is the incredibly unsettling reality we are exploring today. We are looking at the hidden, often totally invisible aftermath of medical care.
Right, the stuff no one talks about.
Exactly. Specifically, what happens when a highly optimized, incredibly advanced clinical environment just abruptly collides with profound social vulnerability.
So today we're taking a deep dive into a really harrowing set of firsthand excerpts from a patient named Stephen Ferry. And he went through something just unimaginable, navigating major open heart surgery and the subsequent grueling recovery while unhoused.
It's just a brutally stark contrast.
It is. And the mission of this deep dive today is to unpack the massive, gaping disconnect between the incredible science of medical healing and the brutal reality of homelessness.
Yeah.
We're going to examine how liability culture and just mountains of bureaucratic red tape actually shape the care you receive, often in ways that completely contradict human health. So, okay, let's unpack this, starting with a conversation from the source material that, honestly, it just stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, I know exactly which one you mean. The interaction with the nurse who had the military background.
Yes, so our author is lying in his hospital bed. He's just days out from having his heart completely repaired, and he gets to talking with one of his floor nurses. And it turns out this nurse didn't just come straight from, like, a quiet nursing school.
Right.
He had previously worked in military bomb disposal during tours in Iraq.
Which is just intense all on its own.
Totally. He spent his days literally diffusing live explosives in an actual war zone. So naturally, the author asks him the million-dollar question, right? Like, which environment actually feels more stressful? Disarming IEDs in combat or working as a nurse in a modern American hospital?
And his answer completely defies any conventional logic.
Literally, without a single moment of hesitation, the nurse chooses the hospital.
It's wild.
He states flat out that the hospital is more psychologically stressful than dealing with live explosives. I mean, I read that and I literally had to just sit back and stare at the wall for a second.
Yeah, it really makes you pause.
How does an environment dedicated to healing human beings create more psychological stress than a literal combat zone?
Well, I think it reveals something profound about the invisible architecture of modern healthcare. The nurse actually explained the underlying mechanics of that stress.
Oh, right, the difference in the threats.
Exactly. In bomb disposal, the threat is super obvious. It is physical and it is entirely binary. You cut the wrong wire and, well, the outcome is immediate.
Right.
But in healthcare, the threat is chronic. It's pervasive, and it is entirely administrative. He cited this constant, just suffocating fear of making a mistake, and not just a clinical mistake, but a legal one.
Oh, yeah.
He talked about the relentless need for documentation, the looming liability concerns, and the ever-present career-ending threat of lawsuits.
So it's almost like the entire healthcare system is forcing its workers to play this incredibly tense, high-stakes game of Jenga.
Oh, that's a perfect way to put it. And every single interaction with a patient is a block you have to carefully slide out.
Yes. Except In this version of Jenga, pulling the wrong block doesn't just mean you lose a fun board game with your friends.
Right. The stakes are a bit higher.
Yeah, it means a devastating malpractice lawsuit.
Right.
It means a state investigation, and basically the absolute destruction of your entire livelihood. I mean, every single time a nurse administers medication or a doctor writes a chart note, they are basically holding their breath, just hoping the entire legal and administrative tower doesn't come crashing down on their heads.
And everyone in that environment is deeply, deeply aware of the tower's fragility. Doctors are just constantly calculating their legal exposure.
Right.
And nurses are spending enormous portions of their 12-hour shifts just documenting everything they do. And crucially, not necessarily to improve clinical continuity, but to create a legally defensible paper trail.
That's so grim.
They're essentially playing defense, They are trying to protect themselves and the institution legally while simultaneously trying to care for these highly vulnerable human beings.
And what the author noticed is that you can actually feel that defensive caution in the room. Like, it changes the very atmosphere of patient care.
Oh, undoubtedly. Patients pick up on that.
Yeah, and it's not that the doctors and nurses don't care. The author actually explicitly notes that many of them, like Dr. Spoward, for instance, are brilliant and deeply compassionate.
Right.
But the staff is operating inside this invisible cage of fear and liability. It's like institutional pressure is just humming in the background of every single interaction, kind of like the buzz of those cheap fluorescent lights.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that defensive posture entirely dictates what happens to a patient the exact moment they are deemed clinically stable. Because once a patient reaches that baseline of stability, well, keeping them in an acute care hospital bed transforms from a medical necessity into a massive liability. And frankly, a severe financial drain.
Right.
So the institutional imperative just immediately shifts from healing to discharging.
And this brings us to the immediate aftermath of his surgery, where things just really start to derail.
Yeah, sure.
And keep in mind, the author did everything right here.
He really did.
He was incredibly proactive. He knew that recovering from open-heart surgery in a vehicle is virtually impossible and wildly dangerous. So long before the surgery even happened, he did the research. He had a plan because he craved that certainty.
Right. He was actively trying to line up post-acute care facilities. And just for anyone listening who might be unfamiliar, post-acute care refers to rehab centers, skilled nursing facilities, or specialized recovery clinics. It's where patients go to regain their strength and basic mobility before they return home. It is a really critical bridge between the intensive care unit and independent living.
So he had those places identified. He had them ready. But then he wakes up. The surgery is over. He's physically just decimated. And suddenly those carefully constructed plans just completely evaporate.
Just gone.
The facilities he had lined up declined to take him. And the reason, I honestly still can't wrap my head around this, the reason was that physical therapy determined he was recovering, quote, too well.
It is the absolute ultimate systemic paradox.
But isn't getting better the whole point? I mean, seriously, how does a system become so incredibly rigid that a patient's hard work and physical progress suddenly becomes a penalty? Like, he pushed himself through agonizing pain to walk down the hospital corridor to show the staff he was improving, and the system essentially said, oops, you walked too far, you no longer qualify for a safe bed.
Well, this happens because we assume insurance decisions are based on common sense, right? But they are actually based on actuarial math. The system's definition of need is strictly clinical. It is entirely blind to a patient's social reality. To an insurance provider, qualifying for acute inpatient rehabilitation requires demonstrating a very specific, measurable physical deficit.
So you have to prove you're broken enough.
Exactly. You have to be impaired enough to mathematically justify the extreme cost of that recovery bed, which, can run over $1,000 a night.
So just because he gritted his teeth and demonstrated mobility, literally just because he could put one foot in front of the other, an algorithm somewhere decided he no longer needed acute monitoring.
And that algorithm is completely oblivious to the fact that his 20 feet of walking ability leads out to a parking lot, not to a house with a working refrigerator and a mattress.
Right.
The hospital's mandate ends at clinical stability. Once you reach that line, the discharge planners step in.
And these are the folks who manage the beds, right?
Right, the administrative staff whose entire job is managing bed turnover. Their primary goal is to clear that room for the next acute emergency.
And the author notes this chilling shift in the environment when this happens. Because he actually had two incredible social workers, Christy Romer and Monica Hutchinson, who fought tooth and nail for him.
I really advocated for him.
They were fierce, trying to secure him in the safe place. But they were up against this entirely uninterested discharge planner who was basically just watching the ticking clock.
Yeah.
And the very moment the author became a placement problem, the tone from the administrative side became purely transactional. Like, they started telling him he just needed to leave. They resorted to financial threats, warning him he could end up personally responsible for the massive hospital bill if he refused to vacate the bed.
The human being in the bed essentially becomes an obstruction in the system. The medical staff are pressured by bed managers, who are in turn pressured by administrators to keep the throughput moving. The ground beneath the author was literally disappearing. They were pushing him out the door, ready or not.
Which forces him into an absolutely horrific situation. I mean, eventually, a single facility did agree to take him, one place down in Santa Cruz. But the author had researched this location too, and it was notorious. It had serious, very recent health violations and ongoing complaints.
Right, because it operated as a facility of last resort. It basically accepted anyone because no one with other actual options would ever willingly go there.
And when he voiced his fears to a surgeon about this place, the surgeon's advice was just, try it, you can always leave.
Wow.
As if checking into a poorly run medical facility with a freshly wired together sternum is like, trying out a new local diner.
Yeah, just give it a shot.
Right. But he is entirely out of options, so he goes. And he stays exactly one night.
Just one night.
Because the conditions he describes in the source material are literally the stuff of nightmares. He is put in a room with a roommate who is over 100 years old.
Oh my goodness.
And throughout the night, this centenarian is crying out, just begging for help, just to use the bathroom.
A completely helpless, profoundly vulnerable individual who is entirely dependent on the staff.
And the staff ignore him. The author lies there in the dark, unable to physically move to help because of his surgery, just listening to this old man plead for basic dignity. And at one point, a staff member finally responds, only to tell the 100-year-old man that they're on break and he should, quote, just use his diaper.
It is a profound violation of human dignity. And psychologically, that is devastating for a patient trying to heal from major surgery.
Totally.
I mean, he is staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of society allows this to exist. And we really have to ask why it exists. These low-income facilities often survive on abysmal Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement rates. The systemic economics are entirely broken.
Right.
Which leads to severe chronic understaffing, terrible wages, and ultimately shocking neglect like this.
And the very next day, the author meets the old man's daughters. They are caring and concerned, clearly trying their absolute best to manage their father's care. And the author is immediately hit with a massive moral dilemma. He thinks, I have to report this place. I am morally obligated to tell the state, to tell these daughters what happens here when the sun goes down.
But then a terrifying reality sets in for him.
Yes.
If he reports the facility and the state actually investigates and shuts it down, what happens to that 100-year-old man?
Right.
Because, just like the author, this nightmare facility might have been the absolute only place willing to take him in the first place.
So what does this all mean? Like, how do you even process a situation where trying to stop elder abuse might actually result in a highly vulnerable person being literally thrown out onto the street?
What's fascinating here is how this completely shatters our standard moral framework. We are so conditioned to believe that choices in healthcare are generally between good and bad, right?
Yeah.
You choose the good doctor over the bad doctor. But what this deep dive reveals is a systemic failure so deep that for the most vulnerable people in our society, the options aren't good or bad. The options are bad or nothing.
Bad or nothing. Wow, that phrase just echoes. You either accept a bed in a facility that tells a 100-year-old man to soil himself because the alternative is sleeping on concrete.
Exactly. When you are unhoused, medically fragile, and entirely dependent on a placement system you cannot control, you realize just how overloaded and fragile the safety net really is.
Yeah.
Shutting down a parable facility doesn't fix the problem if there are 0 alternative beds for those patients. The system is paralyzed.
And that realization drives him to do something incredibly drastic. He decides the bad is actually worse than nothing. So he checks himself out of this facility against medical advice.
Wow.
He signs the AMA paperwork himself.
Yeah.
The staff asks him where he's going. And for the first time since the surgery, he actually has a temporary plan. He managed to book a motel room.
Which, I have to point out, leaving a facility against medical advice directly after open heart surgery is objectively a massive clinical risk.
Oh, sure.
The hospital wanted him in a structured environment. They wanted physical therapists clearing his movements. And frankly, they wanted documentation to protect themselves from liability if he collapsed in the parking lot.
But he gets to this motel room, and he spends a week there. And the way he describes it, you can almost feel the physical relief rolling off the page. I mean, it's just a basic, cheap motel room, but to him, it is an absolute sanctuary.
A safe haven.
The room is quiet, the bed is flat and comfortable, he can finally take a normal shower. He notes how profoundly important a stable, quiet space is psychologically when your body is trying to heal from massive trauma.
It completely highlights the biological necessity of safety. Healing isn't just about cellular regeneration, you know. It requires a parasympathetic nervous system response.
What does that mean practically?
It means your body needs to be out of fight or flight mode to properly allocate resources to healing. That basic motel room provided the psychological safety that a multi-million-dollar hospital and a state-licensed care facility utterly failed to provide.
But a motel room has a ticking clock, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It costs money, and eventually the funds run out. The sanctuary ends. And this brings us to the most dangerous part of his entire journey.
Yeah.
With his money depleted, he has literally no choice but to return to living in his vehicle.
Yeah.
And let's really dig into the physical reality of what that actually means, because the medical community generally forbids heart surgery patients from even riding in a standard vehicle for several weeks.
Oh, the mechanics of the surgery itself make it terrifying. During open heart surgery, they perform a sternotomy, meaning the surgeons literally saw the breastbone in half to access the heart.
Oh.
And then they wire it back together. And while that bone is fusing, there are incredibly strict precautions. You cannot twist your torso. You can't push yourself upright with your arms.
It's like, imagine trying to carefully rebuild a shattered, incredibly delicate antique watch, right? You need a totally steady hand, a perfectly quiet room, and flawless stability.
Right. And now imagine trying to do that intricate repair work while riding inside a moving washing machine.
Yes, exactly. Because every single jolt of the car, every single bump in the road, every time you have to just twist to reach the ignition or grab a bottle of water from the passenger seat, you are threatening to completely undo the delicate healing process that is holding your chest together.
It's excruciating just thinking about it.
Getting in and out of a car requires bending and torquing your spine, trying to sleep in a reclined driver's seat, and then using your core and your arms to pull yourself upright. That puts massive concentrated stress right on that freshly wired sternum.
And that's just baseline existence. The acute risks are lethal. A minor fender bender that deploys a steering wheel airbag directly into a healing sternum could be instantly fatal. It would shatter the bone all over again and cause massive internal trauma.
And it gets even worse. Think about the reality of sleeping in a vehicle when you are unhoused. You are constantly on edge. Imagine it's 2 a.m., you are trying to sleep in a dark parking lot, and suddenly a police officer or just a stranger loudly knocks on your window.
Oh, the startle response alone is incredibly dangerous.
Your heart rate spikes instantly.
Right.
You jump up in a blind panic. That sudden, violent, jerky movement, that totally instinctive reaction to a sudden threat could literally rip your healing sternum apart before you even realize you're awake.
The environment requires constant hypervigilance, which is the exact opposite of the deep rest required for cardiac recovery.
Wait, I'm just putting something together here. How does he even manage the pain?
Right.
Because if I had my chest sawed open, I'd be on heavy narcotics for weeks. But if he's living in his car, he has to be able to move it. And driving under the influence of strong painkillers is illegal and incredibly dangerous.
You've just hit on the most agonizing choice he had to make. Medications prescribed for sternotomies inherently impair judgment, they impair motor skills and reaction time. To survive in that vehicle, to be able to drive it legally and safely enough to avoid getting arrested or killed, the author had to stop taking his necessary pain medications.
He had to choose between treating his immense physical pain and maintaining the basic awareness required to literally survive.
Yeah.
He had to endure the raw, unmedicated agony of a healing chest wound just so his mind was clear enough to drive short distances.
Doctors map out perfect recovery trajectories on whiteboards,
Wow.
assuming a highly controlled environment. They assume you have a refrigerator for your meds, a clean shower to prevent infection, and a comfortable bed to rest your spine.
Yeah.
Take those assumptions away, and the entire protocol collapses. People end up making decisions based not on what is medically recommended, but entirely on what is physically possible.
And as if enduring unmedicated pain in a car wasn't enough, there is one final, just infuriating detail in the source material. A final slap in the face from the bureaucracy. The author actually applied for Social Security Disability Insurance, or SSDI,
Right.
to help him survive this period,
Right.
and he was denied.
And the reason for the denial perfectly illustrates the cold, purely algorithmic nature of the system we've been discussing. SSDI operates on something called a date last insured, which is essentially an expiration date for your coverage based on your past work history.
His date last insured was December 31st.
Okay.
His massive, disabling open-heart surgery took place on January 5th.
Wow. He missed the deadline by 5 days.
5 days.
Because the physical surgery happened 5 days after that arbitrary cutoff, the administrative system ruled that he was technically not disabled while insured.
It's just...
Wow. The reality of his failing heart leading up to the surgery didn't matter. The paperwork said he was 5 days late, so the financial safety net just vanished.
Which brings us back to the core disconnect. I mean, we all have this ingrained expectation that the absolute hardest, most terrifying part of a medical crisis is surviving the operating table. The flashing lights, the anesthesia, the surgery itself. But for the unhoused, for the incredibly vulnerable in our society, the actual nightmare is navigating a system overloaded by institutional pressure, paralyzed by liability, and utterly lacking in basic compassion.
During surgery, you are completely the system's responsibility. The very moment you wake up, you become a liability to be managed, processed, and discharged.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. When you step back and look at the sheer scale of what we are capable of as a society, I mean, we have built a healthcare system capable of literal magic.
Modern medicine can perform miracles that would be totally incomprehensible even 50 years ago. We can stop a human heart, repair its most delicate valves, restart it, and wire the chest back together. It is a massive triumph of billion-dollar medical science and human ingenuity.
But how much of that miraculous capability relies entirely on the unspoken, unwritten prescription that the patient has a warm, stable bed to return to?
That's the real question.
What good is the miracle of surgery? What is the point of all that brilliant engineering and medical skill if the system just abandons the patient to recover in the front seat of a car the moment the stitches are closed? That's the question we want you to mull over today. Until next time, keep digging beneath the surface.